Hello, welcome to the latest episode of Data Unchained. I'm your host, Molly Presley. Before we jump into introducing our guest today, let me tell you a little bit about what we cover in this podcast for those of you who are new. Data has changed a lot in how it's being distributed, how it's being used, how it's being generated over the last 30 or 40 years. If you think back to a mainframe when it was kind of the center of data, a building was built around it, the humans, the applications were all local to it. But now data is being generated in a lot of different places. It's created at the edge, it's in the cloud, it's stored in different places potentially, and being used by applications and users that it wasn't even originally envisioned to be created for. This creates a lot of challenges as far as how to get access to that data. It also creates some really interesting opportunities. Today, we're going to be touching on both and the kind of the history of data, as well as some of the opportunities that are buried within it with new technology that's being deployed. But without further ado, first I want to introduce Carl Watts. I was just telling Carl I'm very excited to have him on the show because he's a very well-known person in a lot of the data and storage industry, both the groups that have been building how these workflows should work, but also he manages a really interesting data set as well. So Carl, welcome to the show.
Hi, I've worked for multiple vendors throughout the years, but my current job is I work for the Library of Congress in the Operation and Maintenance Division. I'm responsible for maintaining roughly 150 petabytes of stored data that's both on tape and on disk today. And I've been part of the primary person responsible for moving thousands of file systems, thousands or millions of files, close to actually 1.2 billion at this point, getting up to 1.8. I think by the end of the year, and moving that data around for different migrations. So I've touched everything from the early days of file serve and vol serve to today. We primarily use Versity Scout FS as our primary archival storage. And for our presentation storage, we're primarily using IBM Spectrum Scale, which was formerly GPFS for those people that have had GPFS experiences in the past.
So tell us a little bit about, maybe people know what the Library of Congress does. Maybe they think they know and they're not really aware of the full scope. But talk about just what kind of data is sitting in the Library of Congress right now.
Whenever I get asked the question of what type of files we have, the answer is usually yes. We store everything from movies and films, video, audio, text. We are the U.S. Copyright Office. So when books or medium is being submitted, we receive that. We have different collection groups. So we have an Asian division. The American Folklife Collection also houses the Veterans History Project, which after yesterday, usually gets the largest hits is on Veterans Day. So having just passed Veterans Day, it was a fairly large presence, which is a collection of oral histories from veterans that we've collected over the years, to include now Desert Storm and folks that were serving in Afghanistan and Iraq in the last 5+ years. We also have digitization facilities. So we are digitizing old film and audio. So we've also receiving one of our largest collections is web archive data. So if you go to Internet Archive, we have a similar type collection, but not equal to what Internet Archive has. Ours is roughly about 6 petabytes, where Internet Archive is hundreds of petabytes. In the case of copyright, e-serials, e-books that we're receiving, Uh, those collections that are being received are roughly curated, meaning that the ISBN is collected, but there's also a lot of submaterial that's in there. So yes, you have a PDF file that might be the actual book, but everything that made up the books, all the images, all the Excel spreadsheets, any Word documents, anything like that that's made up as part of the book, sometimes actually gets submitted with it. So that collection is now well over 400 million objects. Um, and then we store it in 3 different locations. So we do a 3-2-1 on that. So with our geo-dispersed location being in AWS today.
Okay. So this is a lot of data, a lot of variety, very valuable data. Is all of it online or is some of it kind of in a dusty archive somewhere? What does that look like?
The quick answer is no, not all of it's online. Copyright material isn't 100% online um, because of its copyright. Uh, we have collections that not all of it is online either. If I look at Asian or African Middle East division, they have maybe 20 to 30% of what's in the archive is what's online. But we also don't, we're getting to the point now where we're storing online the derivative copy, meaning it comes in as a TIFF image, but what we're putting out there is a JPEG image. In the collection, they're both there today. We're working towards reducing the object count by saying we'll have a master, call it the TIFF image, and then what's online for people to view will be that JPEG 2000 that then goes through a tile server or a PDF file versus a Word document. So no, not everything is online today.
You've been doing some really interesting writing. If for the listeners, if you don't follow Carl on LinkedIn, he's going to get things set up on some other locations as well. They're a little bit better for publishing, but he writes. You've been writing a lot of really interesting thought leadership pieces, musings, that type of thing. But one of the ones you wrote was about what if or when AI inhales the Library of Congress. I know this is kind of a future, but maybe not too future looking thought. Talk a little bit about what led to you writing this article.
I just started getting into AI over the past, 4 or 5 months. And I started looking at what we have in our collection and how we don't have enough people to go through our current collections and then be able to build a coherent collection. In other words, one that spans more than one curatorial body. So we might have somebody in manuscripts division, another person in rare books. They both may have information from, let's say, President Lincoln. And there might be something in uh, American folk life as well about him. Those different curatorial bodies have their metadata, but that metadata isn't shared across.
And is this all digital at this point? So when I think about data silos, I kind of think about storage silos or business unit silos, but this sounds like this might even go a little bit deeper than that.
Uh, the way to look at it is there are subdirectories or prefixes within a file system or a bucket. American folk life is in one prefix or subdirectory, rare books, another one, manuscripts, another one. And yeah, the ETL system does put it into search, and our search engine allows you to search across them. But to be able to build a time sequence across all those, that's not presently available. And as I was looking at it, was okay. Let's take Roosevelt instead, because then you've got audio and video as well. So you've got his writings, you've got some books he may have written, or books that were written about him. You've got some films that have been digitized about him. Some of his speeches may be on a record that was digitized. And you want to build a time series across that whole knowledge base. Right now, that would require a lot of manpower to get that accomplished. So, could we accomplish that via use of AI? And the answer is maybe. It would take a lot of work.
And a lot of humans ahead of the AI being able to do its thing.
Yeah, because the other thing you got to remember here is that um, metadata can be pulled out of the files and can be garnered, um, but unless you've got crowdsourcing that's basically making sure that the stuff, everything is accurate. Even if you go into AI, you would have to do some level of crowdsource to validate all that data, in my opinion. But I'm willing to be proved wrong.
It reminds me, I've worked in the media and entertainment space a fair bit. And it reminds me of back in the days when they were trying to get tagging of videos automated, where you could say, like, here's all the places a fire is in the film, or there's a certain, actor, and they had machines doing it right next to people physically tagging and trying to make sure it was actually accurate what the machines were seeing, because they had a hard time really understanding what you were saying in a video, because they're machines. So yeah, same kind of thing. They had to kind of crowdsource and validate for a long time before they could actually let the people out of the loop. Sounds kind of similar.
Yeah.
And then you also talk a little bit about once you have the metadata, so we've figured out how to merge this metadata and tag everything. How do you query it? How do you kind of align across all the different types of metadata? You were talking about one vector won't save you. Maybe talk a little bit about that as well.
So the way I was seeing it was, you've got different tools for audio, going to have a different tool for video, and the way to get it, you'll end up with could end up with multiple vectors for the same data, same data. Because you could be running speech to text, but you might actually have the script that goes with it too. The script goes through a text engine, or it goes through, through a text system. Meanwhile, you've got an audio going through doing a voice to text, but it's also being times time series or timestamp to where it is in the video, and that's a separate grouping. And then if you're doing frame pulls from a video, that's going to be another one. So how do you get all those? And again, I'm a novice in this area, so I was just looking at how do you get everything to work, and it's like, well, I end up with one. Well, it looks like I end up with one AI engine for each. Um, well, I shouldn't say, well, for each modality, but then being able to marry all the modalities together into one engine seemed to be uh, difficult at the moment, anyway, from what I can tell.
One of the other areas you highlighted of that's difficult is the governance piece. You mentioned things like cultural bias, copyright, privacy controls, that type of thing. How do you think you might tackle something like that? With a repository like the Library of Congress.
It's going to be difficult.
Yeah,
First
sounds
question
overwhelming.
Is it shareable? Can you make it part of your overall search? And the answer to that is some of it yes, some of it no. If you got copyrighted material, there's a 100-year horizon on some of that content. So if you got public domain data, you're fine, but you then have to ensure that every asset you're touching, you understand what controls are already on it. We have some things that say it can be that's been digitized, but it says not for public or external public use. It has to be viewed only at the Library of Congress in one of our reading rooms. So do we add that to the search engine? And if you did, do you end up having to write or into our AI? Do we end up having an internal AI to an external AI? Uh, it gets rather difficult very
Yeah,
quickly.
absolutely. And even just crawling through, even once you have the policy, crawling through and tagging each item or group of, I guess you maybe could call them collections over what can be shared, what can't, because it wasn't probably initially metadata that was captured.
Yeah. And then you get into, you got the copy. You want to be able to make it something searchable internal for what books. You want to be able to see if person X is taken information out of person Y's book, and being able, because again, being the U.S. Copyright Office, if there's a arbitration that has to happen, somebody's got to go back through and validate that somebody pulled something. And if it's a digital book, the good news is it should become simpler to do. The bad, but then that's an internal only type system.
One of the other areas before we kind of talk through the playbook of some of the things you could do to tackle this, GPUs. So certainly GPUs are expensive. You need a bunch of them to do a lot of the work. But how would you tackle the GPU problem? Because it's not just about storage; it's about having the budget and the expertise to run the GPUs. Do you have a program there today, or is that something still being considered in future
No,
budget cycles or something?
as I even said in my article, this is just a thought experiment at this point. Um, I see a horizon where we're going to want to do something like this. One of the other agencies that we have within the Library of Congress is the Congressional Research Service. So I foresee that they'll eventually want to have us be able to take their information and what's coming in from copyright and being able to search that and build new product from old product.
So you took the time to kind of do the thought process of a playbook of what this might look like and some of the technologies that you would take advantage of. Let's talk that through a little bit. MCP, or I think it's called multimodal pre-processing stack. Where does that's a new kind of MCP server people are putting in front of data environments and tying into AI factories. Where do you see this enhancing your current architectures?
I think we'll need to put it in front of the archive at the same time as doing uh, a migration.
Why at the point of migration? I'm pretty sure I know as you read things off tape, but maybe talk through the magic of doing things at the point of migration.
At the point of migration, which is one of the other reasons why I was thinking about this, we're getting ready to do a full lift and shift from one tape technology to a new tape technology here at the library. So we're going from T10KD tape, which is old Sun SDK tape that hasn't been sold since 2017, to now LTO 10 tape. And it's going to be being pushed into a hybrid system that is an S3 front end for us. So we're going to be pulling back all the files, validating all the files, and then pushing all the files from uh, or from the staging's disk out to the new tape library or the new S3 endpoint. At that point, when we're prior to moving or once we put it into the S3 endpoint, it's online for you know a few days to possibly a week. And at that point, if you're doing the full collection, all 34 to 35 petabytes, that would be an opportune time to start scanning through that data. We're already going to be doing checksums, fixities of all those files. So we have to have them all online for that period of time. So to me, that was where I would put it, would be somewhere in that front end of, okay, we're migrating the data and either putting it against our S3 endpoint internally so it could read it from there, or reading it off of a NAS endpoint on the file system off of Versity.
And so you have this opportunity where the data is live in an environment. You can work with it a bit before it goes back into a tape system. Talk a little bit about your tiering. You mentioned, we have the S3 front end. Is that sitting in some kind of like hot SSD performance environment? Kind of just talk about the tiers maybe a little bit.
Sure. Our hybrid is basically going to be built on top of, you probably hear people groan. Um, we're building it on top of Quantum Active Scale today, primarily because it's 100% S3 compatible. It also provides us a level of protection that allows us to have a single site being fully 100% protected in case we have another site go down. So we'll always be able to get to our data. It has SSDs that'll be in it for the metadata. It also has SSDs for the high velocity input. Then it's got regular hard drives, and then it will then take and push the data out to the LTO tape. And then over a period of time, once I think it's 5 petabytes that we have, that'll be a cache space for the data. Once that 5 petabytes is filled, it'll start releasing so that new data can
It's a
go
big
in.
cache.
On the other side, we got a 5 petabyte cache on the stage side. So you don't want your data on the stage side to release before you get everything off the tape. So, and we're doing this in production. So, kind of one of those, we get a green field on one side, but on the other side, we're still hooking to the old system. And we're not going 100%.
That's also live.
That's live. And we also have data coming in from, that is S3, that'll be coming in to the system that bypasses our preservation system, but it goes to our new preservation system.
How fast does new data come into the Library of Congress? I always kind of think about it as a historical repository, but of course there's new data coming in.
So that answer is also one of those, it depends on what day of the week it is and what month we're at. We can see anywhere from a few million files in one day that represents only a couple hundred gig to a few hundred files in a day, and that could represent 4 terabytes. So it all depends on which workflows are running that day. But on average, we're doing about 250 terabytes a month.
I kind of took us off track, but it just popped in my head. I was curious.
No problem.
So when you think about, you've done this migration, you've gone into your cache, you're moving into the new kind of greenfield system. How do you imagine indexing search working in that new system? So you kind of have this opportunity to unify metadata, add metadata. You now have MCP as an option. How will that look in a future looking state, do you think?
Truthfully, not sure. As part of O&M, yes, I get to pontificate on what I think it should look like, but I have no control over it. That is on the web services side and the curatorial side. What I would hope for is that that we would have the staffing to be able to put in the right pipelines to pull as much metadata out as we can, so that we can at least pre-stage the metadata. But unfortunately, that might not. I don't think that'll happen, and definitely won't happen in the next year, unless some funding comes available.
Yeah, I know some of this is theoretical, but the idea of taking what sounds like a kind of siloed and a lot of humans potentially in the process to get this going to the vision of automating the data science pipeline, so ETL, ELT. Do you feel like that's fairly viable, that you could get into kind of an automated pipeline generation, or is this something that you're still going to be working through a couple of years from now towards that end?
That is actually getting automated
It
via
is.
a different method, but it's not part of an AI. So the library is building its own new preservation system that's built on top of AWS first or cloud first infrastructure, that goes through. They get a list of all the files that are currently either online or in preservation. It blasts through all those files, captures all the metadata, does the OCR of all the if OCR is needed. Um, it ETLs it. So from start to finish, to do a million objects, I've seen them do that in less than 30
Hmm.
minutes,
That's pretty impressive.
which internally, it takes a lot longer than
Yeah.
that. So the niceness of AWS is you can build things out to, or in a cloud environment, you can build things out to do what you want. There's just a cost. You have to do some cost analysis on, um, and that's where I was talking about. We're working towards coming up with a master copy of something, but we're not storing the derivative copy in with the masters anymore. So they'll be able to. So our collection should drop from 1.8 billion objects, probably closer to 800 million by the time they get done stripping out all of the derivatives and non-archival material, because we're dealing with, see, 20, actually 35 years of cruft, uh, meaning that our collection, I have files that go back to the 90s
Okay.
in the preservation space.
And that's part of the beauty of tape, for sure, that you can do that, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it's why a lot of these big archives still sit out there on tape. And even in some of the cloud stores, they're sitting on tape. They do great at that long term retention for sure and drive great cost models. This sounds complicated, and maybe we tie things up with kind of why would we do this. But I think you've highlighted well that it's not easy. You made a comment. It's not like you can just throw it in a vector store and let ChatGPT figure it out. Like this is a complex project, not just operationally, but in making sure that you have the performance, that you have the quality, that you have the protection that you need. But why would you do this? When you think about the Library of Congress, is not just about preservation, but what are the big things that you would like to accomplish with this art, with all this data, that would make it worth embarking on this project?
one of my pet peeves is there's this thing called Wikipedia that is based off of what humans think the world is or what history is. But we have that information here at the library, or some, not all of it maybe, but a good section of it. We have the maps, we have the books, we have the oral histories, and you could actually build something that's more historic based, and you're not looking for somebody's opinion about something. Granted, AI is going to, or you can have it so AI can give you an opinion, but that's not what I was looking for. What I was looking for is how do you build um, I won't call a center of truth, but a historic a historic rendering of truth that the library could utilize for things like teaching, for research, um, and allow people to be able to go, okay, this book that we just read has this information in it. Go back in and go, okay, can you show me a piece of video or a piece of audio that's associated with this, and be able to feed that and also get it so that we can take that information and make it available to the visually impaired or the audio impaired, because a lot of this stuff we see things like recognize from uh, AWS that would allow you to present this uh, to people with impairment.
I do like the idea of, I think you used a term when we were doing a prep call of kind of, this is the AI of record that's kind of governed and controlled on a lot of our history. And we hadn't talked about the Wikipedia reference, but like you say, that's a lot of humans that are submitting their thoughts, but it's not necessarily governed in the way that you're talking about. And I like that, and that it could be tied to different multimedia stories that all have different flavor that has a really great appeal. And I also think in this world of AI where everyone's starting to wonder, can they trust anything? What can they trust? Having some things that are rigorously governed would have a lot of value.
So I mean, this is right up there, and I'll get slapped for this, but it's okay. um, so I worked on a project back in 2000. We were going to take all of the congressional committee rooms and start recording them and saving the recordings and putting them online. And one of the questions that was given to me at the time um, was, well, how do we validate that you didn't change the video? And it's like, well, we check some of the video as we're receiving it. Now that we're seeing fake videos going out there, it's like, okay, yeah, you got us on that one, but we do have congressional video going out all the time now that started under Speaker Boehner back in was it either 2011 or 2012. We started doing it then, but the thing that held us back was the idea that somebody could change it. But the funny part of it is it gets changed, and most people don't realize that. So there's a thing called the congressional record. The congressional record does not reflect. It reflects what they wanted you to think they said, but it's not 100% of what they said. So anyway, I'm sorry, I digressed too far into that.
But the point of there are policies and procedures that we've at least come to trust, being able to be applied to an AI system has a lot of value, and maybe it has a few quirks inside it as well. But it's a much more trusted method for sure.
Even if you did go out and start doing what I think, you still need a level of governance or control that sits above it, because the libraries generated this data. It needs to be run more as a consortium than just the library itself, because you probably would want to bring in colleges, universities, and other libraries knowledge into it as well to make it to get as much information out into the system as you can, and then less chance of hallucinations or wrong opinions.
Sure. Use some technology and some governance to accomplish that, right?
Yeah.
Well, Carl, this has been a really interesting conversation. I appreciate you jumping on the show. Glad to see that things are lining up, that everybody's going back to work and getting paid for the things they're doing in your part of the world as well today. Anything else that you'd like to close with?
If anybody wants to get more information about what I'm up to, they can check LinkedIn under Carl Watts. And also I've been working on my biggest work I'm doing right now is on what I refer to as the migration tax, and looking at how much it actually costs to move that bit of data from point A to point Z.
What caused you to have passion around that?
I've been doing it for 15 years. And I've actually referred to it as being on the hamster wheel of migration. Because the first, I'm now going on migration number 11 and 12. Since I've been here at the library, I've been here for 15 years.
So the migration tax, and is there an ultimate goal not to have to migrate again? Do you see that as a possibility?
I still want to get to where we can get one gold copy that doesn't have to be remastered, but there isn't any media that's ready yet. I mean, we're looking at things like DNA and
Mm-hmm.
ceramics, company like
Yep.
Cerebyte. Uh, but yeah, I have yet to find uh, the, every once in a while we bump into something that we think is going to be the end all be all, and it turns out not so much.
And even if you have the media that solved, you still have to have the systems that can read the media and everything else, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been involved in things like optical tape to there was a company that was getting ready to do stainless steel tape,
I haven't heard of that one.
and that looked promising. It looked promising. It was a little company called Cuneiform. They were doing stainless steel disc and tape.
Didn't come to fruition,
Did
though.
not pan out. The problem is preservation archiving is still a niche, and we're down to one real vendor that makes tape drives and two vendors that make tape.
Exactly.
So a niche is a niche.
Well, Carl, it's been great having you on the show. Definitely, I've enjoyed reading Carl's musings, so to speak, but also, embedded in deep technology experience and thought leadership. So it's been fun since I've begun reading his stuff here in the last month or so to watch what's coming out on a fairly frequent basis. So definitely recommend checking out what he's doing. And we will definitely keep an eye on what you're doing in the AI, building your own LLM or whatever you end up calling it space for the library as well. Thanks for jumping on the show. Thanks for listening to Data Unchained, powered by Hammerspace. To learn more, visit hammerspace.com. If you have a guest you would like to hear on the show, email me at molly@hammerspace.com.